I'm Jonathan Shaw, host of the Let's Talk About the Built Environment podcast. Today I'm with Tom Wilmot of Capital & Centric, which is genuinely an amazing business. Stay tuned to hear about initiatives around homelessness, diversity in the industry, and broccoli for breakfast. Today on Let's Talk About the Built Environment podcast, I'm very happy to be joined by Tom Wilmot, Joint MD of Capital & Centric. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Jonathan.
So, first and foremost, just to look into where you grew up and what first led you to a career in the built environment.
Yeah, so I was born in Derbyshire, grew up in Lincolnshire. So I was doing my A-levels. A lot of my friends were going to university. I think I was always somebody who I think the system, was never supposed to go to university according to the system. And the reason I say that is I'm from a relatively working class background, and I was never particularly academic at school. So I was never really expecting to go to university. And it kind of dawned on me subconsciously. I was watching a lot of those property programs like Escapes the Country, Homes Under the Hammer. It kind of got me thinking about the built environment and property and construction. And from there, I kind of started researching property courses, and I learned that there was a whole industry and there was a profession. There was a governing body called the RICS, and I needed to be on a course that was accredited by the RICS, and that was kind of how I got into
Daytime telly then is to blame.
Basically, yeah.
That's interesting.
Lucky I wasn't watching Loose Women really, or Jeremy Kyle. So I ended up doing a degree in urban land economics at Sheffield Hallam University. Yeah, it was a general practice surveying degree with a few economics modules. And when I got on that course, I found there was a lot of people on that course that were there because either their dad was a surveyor or their uncle was a surveyor. As you know, Jonathan, our sector has never been the most diverse, and I think historically surveying's been referred to as a bit of an old boys club, and there's almost generations of surveyors. And I found that on my course there was a lot of people that were there not because they really were passionate about working in the built environment, but because somebody had told them, you should go and do this. It's a respected career, and there'll be a well-paid job at the end of it. Whereas I was there because I was really interested in property and real estate, and I was passionate about it. I don't think my parents knew what I was doing. I was very interested in what I did. I did really well on the course. I got a first-class honours degree.
I saw that, yeah.
I actually got the top mark on the degree prep.
All right.
I wasn't a teacher's pet. I was just very interested in the course.
When I went to college, I did a H&D, and then I did a degree, and I think I always wanted a job, but I think I found out incrementally about the RICS and the APC, etc. But I guess that both sides helped you with, obviously, like I say, choosing the right degree, a accredited degree, etc. So you've got a first, obviously you're hot in the market. So what was next after that?
So I, as part of my course, there was an opportunity to extend it from 3 to 4 years and do a year in industry. So I took that opportunity and I went to work for a company called Sanderson Weatherall in Leeds, and had a great year, and I was really, really grateful for that opportunity. That was kind of 2008, 2009. So the credit crunch was just happened. We're in quite a deep recession. There was a lot of people being laid off, a lot of young people were losing their jobs. So I really appreciate the opportunity and Sanderson Weatherall not pulling their placement program, their internship program, and that was a great year for me because I learned a lot, not just about property and surveying, about the world of working, and a lot of kind of soft skills came with that, and I had a great year, and I think probably the one thing I took away from that year was, as much as I enjoyed, I kind of sat in a valuation department for half the year, and I was in a kind of corporate real estate department for the other half, where I had some kind of experience in disposals. But what I took away from that is I kind of learned that when I did get into the industry following graduation, I kind of wanted to work for a property company or a developer and kind of be doing it rather than be in a consultancy capacity advising on it. That was kind of what I really took away. So I went back to university, finished my degree. I went backpacking around South America for 6 months, took a bit of time out, came back, ready to start work. And I wanted a job there and then. And the problem was the milk round events were just opening again for the intake for the following September, but I didn't want to wait kind of 10 months for a job. So I contacted the university, and I had some good relationships with lots of the lecturers. So I basically put the feelers out and just said, look, if you're aware of any employment opportunities, please kind of put my name forward. And through one of those connections, there was a Sheffield Hallam alumni who was working for a company called the Mansion Group, who were a propco in the purpose-built student accommodation sector. And they said, yeah, we're looking for a graduate. So I interviewed for that job, and unfortunately I got it. And that was kind of my first proper job. So that was what brought me to Manchester. And what Mansion were doing, they'd set up a couple of their own funds. So they had a fund listed on the Channel Islands Stock Exchange, and they also had a pay for property authorised investment fund. And their kind of business plan really was buying existing student accommodation blocks with some kind of value add potential. And they were flipping them into a fund and kind of managing them for the fund. And it was a niche sector to get into, but what was great for me was that sector was relatively recession-proof, PBSA. So there was a lot of my mates at the time who'd managed to get jobs were working for the big consultancies, probably doing sales brochures to let 2,000 square foot retail units. I was kind of thrown in the deep end doing 15, 20 million quid acquisitions, probably within 12 months of starting at the Mansion Group. So because they were raising so much money and they were so acquisitive, I was getting a lot of transactional experience and a lot of funding experience. And that was what I think gave me a bit of a head start initially.
Okay, and I know looking at your background, you ended up doing work in Europe as well, which is super interesting.
Yeah, so I'd been at Mansion for almost 3 years, and I thought, I need to get out of this sector. It's quite niche. I'd felt like I'd learned everything there was to know about student accommodation. I thought I should probably try and move out of an alternative sector and try and get something a bit more mainstream. Around at that time, I got headhunted by a company called the Crosslane Group. And I said to them, who are also a PBSA developer, investor, and I said, I'm actually trying to get out of this sector. And they said, well, hear us out. And what they were doing was, it was purpose-built student accommodation, but they were expanding into Europe. And I think that opportunity kind of seduced me into staying in the sector for a few more years. So, I think at the time I was probably 26, 27. I was jumping on a flight every week and in my suit, going to MIPIM at the age of mid-20s. And it was great. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. It was absolutely fantastic, brilliant experience. But after about 3 years, all those feelings I had at Mansion came flooding back to me, and it was kind of worse at this point because I thought I've gone from something that's quite niche to something that's very niche, because I didn't really think that job existed. Certainly in Manchester, probably existed in London. So I kind of thought, if I'm not careful, I'll end up being pigeonholed, and I'll reach a bit of a glass ceiling. And also the novelty of jetting around had worn off. So I did 3 years at Crosslane, and then I decided to look for another job and ended up I moved to work for a large Scottish construction company called the Robertson Group.
They're colossal, aren't they?
Yeah, they're very big in Scotland. They probably turn over 700-800 million quid a year. And I joined their property team. So their kind of business model in their property team was, it was a self-sufficient division within the business, a development company really, but they contracted with their in-house contractor. So it wasn't just about development. It was creating work for the contracting business. And there, ironically, the first scheme I did there was a PBSA scheme in Lancaster. So obviously it's a difficult sector to avoid, purpose-built student accommodation. But I also ended up getting quite a lot of hotel experience and a lot of BTR experience, and I learned a lot. And I think I was there for 2 years, and I probably learned more in that 2 years than I had. And after about 2 years, I was contacted by Tim Heatley at Kaplan Centric, and I went to meet Tim, had a good chat. Subsequently met Adam Higgins, the other co-founder, and had a good conversation. And yeah, that was about 6.5 years ago, and the rest is history, really.
So great to come to Kaplan Centric, but something struck me then when we were chatting was that you've seemed to have managed your career quite well. So when you were at the Robertson Group, where were you hoping to get to next?
I didn't necessarily go to Robertson as a stepping stone. I think one thing I've always done in my career is whenever my learning, my personal development began to decelerate, I would always look for a move. Not necessarily in a different business. Sometimes it was a different role within the business. But I kind of thought, whenever I'm young, it's important to kind of maintain the same velocity of kind of learning and personal development. and that's that's something I've managed to maintain throughout my career. And I think, if I'm honest, I wasn't looking for a move away from Robertson, but when Tim and Adam contacted me, Captain Centric having the large brand that they do, and being the opportunity to be involved in really exciting projects, I guess was what tempted me to move really.
Great. Okay, so can you tell us who Capital and Centric are, where they came from, and sort of the story? And also, I guess I'd be interested in where they were when you came into them 6 years ago and what turned your head.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So Capital Centric are a social impact developer and regeneration specialist. So it was founded by Tim Heatley and Adam Higgins probably about 14 years ago. And when Tim and Adam came together, they had a shared passion for cool design and exemplar architecture. But also there was a shared kind of passion for social impact and really wanting to leave a kind of positive, lasting legacy in every single town and city they touched.
And what was their backgrounds prior to putting this together? So
Adam was from a fairly conventional property background, similar-ish to me. So he'd done a RICS accredited degree. He'd gone and got his APC. He did a short stint in London and then worked for Peel Holdings for quite some time before then going on to Ask and Property Alliance. Tim took a slightly less conventional route into the sector. So Tim actually trained as a lawyer and then ended up working for a developer called Modus for some time. And that's and I think at the time they're both working in the industrial sector and ended up JVing a couple of schemes, and that's how they found each other.
Fantastic. So, as you mentioned, seems to be a high-profile, high-visible business. Always seems to have a buzz about it. You're always, interest being generated, doing super things, different things, TV shows, regeneration, brain, etc. So, you've been there 6 years. What do you think is special about it?
So, there's a real passion for architecture, and I think every single brief on every single job to the architect is this needs to be an award-winning development, this needs to be an Instagram development, and we really push the boundaries on aspiring for excellence in design and architectural standards. There's a big social impact mandate within the business, so every project we get involved with, we have an aspiration to make a positive social impact. And actually, if we can't satisfy ourselves that we can make that impact, that project simply isn't for us. And the reason we take that stance is we think there's a real opportunity in our sector to do some real good. And I'm talking about influencing human behaviour and facilitating social interaction and shaping culture and really changing the trajectory of towns and cities by building a sense of community, aspiration and pride. And what we do is kind of transformational regen, and where our skills are put to best use really is working in towns and cities that have been overlooked or unloved, or simply that there's been a lack of development, or the development that has come forward has been quite underwhelming. And that's where we can really make a difference. And it's not just about making a difference to the residents in our building or the local population. We're talking about making a difference for generations to come and that kind of ripple effect. So I think what makes us different is our approach is very much people-centric. We've got a real kind of human-centred approach to regeneration, putting people at the forefront of a lot of our design decisions, and also having social impact at the forefront of a lot of our thinking as well. And I think that's how we differ. And I think the other thing, certainly the feedback I've had from a lot of people, is people find our brand and our marketing quite refreshing. We've got a really strong in-house marketing and graphic design team, and our kind of tone of voice and our house style is a little bit playful and a little bit refreshing, and kind of moving well away from kind of a corporate stance. And I think not by everyone, but certainly a lot of people in the sector receive that really well.
So I would see regeneration to sit with you. Do you do any new builds or traditional builds like a major house builder?
We do, yeah. So I think a lot of people associate us with kind of the restoration of heritage assets because we've done a lot of that. But we do a lot of new build, and as we've become bigger and bigger, I think we're doing more and more new build because we've got an appetite to be involved in bigger projects, and the heritage assets aren't always the largest buildings. So there's a lot of urban regen, both new build and existing buildings. We've also got a suburban housing arm, and we've built a brand called Neighbourhood, and that's like to challenge the house building industry, which we think is a sector that probably hasn't innovated for 50 or 60 years. And that's all about dismantling the preconceived ideas of what a family home should look like or what a community should look like, and piecing it back together to come up with something that we think is quite contemporary. So we've got homes that are net zero from an operational perspective. We've got kind of more open plan homes that kind of maximise point-to-point view instances and generally feel a bit more spacious. And the more contemporary homes that will offer things like 1-bed houses up to 4-bed houses. And that's really to try and bridge the gap from, you'll have young professionals living in quite trendy city centre apartments, and they want to have a family and they want to move into the suburbs. And it's almost bridging that gap from, at the moment you've got a trendy open plan apartment to what might be a 1930s or Victorian terrace house or even a new build house. And it's a massive shift, and we think there's probably something in the middle that will still feel spacious and cool and airy and contemporary.
I was watching something recently, and there was a suggestion that the large house builders may put profit over volume. So is there something with capital and centric where, as you mentioned, there's the people first? Is that sitting you opposite the volume house builders?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're very conscious that we've got to be able to compete with those house builders, and we need to, we understand how we can compete. And I think how we compete is we think our housing typologies are a little bit denser, and we think we can get more homes per acre. That will allow us to compete. We're never going to build as cheap as the house builders because they've got established supply chains, and we spend more on architecture and design. So in order to compete, we need to have layouts that are a little bit denser, but also the price points need to be slightly more aspirational.
Excellent. So what makes a good residential development, and how do you go about creating a community?
So I think it's doing a lot of the little things well, lots and lots of little sort of things. So take internally what makes a good residential development. It's things like having slightly larger homes that are bigger than the nationally described space standards. It's having better floor-to-ceiling heights. It's having higher glazing proportions. It's having maximising point-to-point view distances with more symmetrical open plan layouts. It's all those subtle things that give this sense of kind of quality and space, really. With our new build, we'll always try and do something to differentiate our design, and what we'll do things like expose the concrete soffits and the services, which we think look cooler and more contemporary, but they actually give you a better floor-to-ceiling height as well. So we'll do little things like that.
Being quite brave, I guess, isn't it? Instead of the standard.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone. We were selling homes in Phoenix, which is in Piccadilly East in Manchester, and that's got exposed concrete soffits and exposed services. And I remember one lady looking around. She said, "When are you putting the ceiling in?" and that it's not for everyone, but it's kind of sticking your neck out to be confident to do something a little bit different and have confidence in your ability to do it well. So that's the kind of things we'll do internally. Externally, we're really big on landscape design and very passionate about having very kind of lush, verdant, evergreen species all over our courtyards and in our public realm. And we think that really gives a sense of quality, but also helps create a community. And it's kind of putting people at the forefront of your decisions, trying to understand how your development can facilitate social interaction. So an example is Crusader Mill in Manchester. One of the things we did there is we designed a big cloister that wrapped around an internal landscaped courtyard, because we knew that would result in our residents passing each other more every day. That's a car-free development.